To make a frequency distribution picture for continuous variables, we are going to use binned frequency tables and then binned histograms. So these pertain to the average trait variables and the GPA variable. So to do this, we are going to first copy the variable and put it into a new worksheet. I'm copying my example variable that I'm working with here, which is self-esteem average. So this was just an average self-esteem scale. And I'm going to give it a name, self-esteem. This is a new worksheet, so I'm calling it self-esteem. This is where I'm going to keep my information about this variable. So to create a binned frequency table, we first need to make bins. All right, so just as a reminder about what binned frequency tables are and what bins are, each bin for a bin frequency table represents a range of values. Okay, so for example, say I have a scale such as this, which ranges from 1 to 4, right? The questions were answered on a scale of 1 to 4, right? Where 1 was strongly disagree and 4 was strongly agree. Okay, so that's my hypothetical range for the average self-esteem score that someone could have. Okay, but because if you look at the values here, there's lots of decimal places, right? We've got like someone could have a score of 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, 2.3. There would be too many individual values to have a count for each value, right? So we've got to create bins, which are ranges, okay? Ranges within the scale, okay? So if I wanted to create a bin that ranged from 1 to 2, then the count, right, would just be all of the individuals who scored between 1.01 and 2.00. Okay, so that would be the count. So say if 20 was my count for the 1 to 2 bin, then that means 20 people scored between the values of 1 and 2. So I need bins. And I need to tell Excel what the bins are. I'm going to do that eventually, but first I'm going to write out my bins. For the trait scales, as I said in the instructions, there's really no hard and fast rules for how wide your bin should be, right? Should you have between 1 and 2, or should you have between like 1 and 1.5? It's really up to the researcher. And what I'm going to tell you for the trait scales, which I think makes sense, you are going to create bins with a width of 0.25, so like a quarter of 1 point. I'm going to paste something in here that I have from the instructions. Okay. All right, so using these guidelines, for example, for a 1 to 4 scale, the bins would be this. All right, I've listed these values here. Now, what you tell Excel, though, is just the upper limit of that bin. So in my first bin, I'm going to write in 1.25. My second bin is going to be 1.50. Right, my third bin, right, which ranges from 1.51 to 1.75. The upper limit is 1.75. So that's what I write in Excel in my bins. So I'm going to go and do that. So see, I've just entered all the upper limits for my bins into the bin column. All right, so now that we have our bins defined, we are going to create a binned frequency table. To do this, we're going to use the data analysis tool. So we're going to click on the data ribbon, go over to data analysis, and we're actually going to use the histogram tool in analysis. We're going to identify the input range as our self-esteem variable. So input range is just you're identifying your variable. And for the bin range, you want to highlight the heading bins and also all of the numbers you have written down under that. Don't highlight the column, just for this, highlight the numbers there for the bins. Make sure that labels is checked. I don't think it's always checked by default, but that's really important. And you are going to select new worksheet ply, okay? This is just a safer option. If you identify output range and try to put a cell in here where the output goes, in my experience, it's a little funny sometimes. So it's safer to put it into a new worksheet and then copy what you get from the worksheet into this sheet that you have the data in. So let's go and do that. All right, so see, it's put in a new worksheet, the binned frequency table for my self-esteem average. Something just to note, it will automatically kind of by default make this more row, this category that's more. It's kind of like an overflow bin where it's meant to, if you accidentally forgot to create a bin, then it will kind of count anyone who doesn't fall into one of these bins. So as long as it says 0, you're good. It means you haven't forgotten any category, and you can just delete that. So then you're going to copy this table back into your self-esteem. Okay, I had to just go and copy that again. Sometimes you'll find Excel gets a little picky with copy and paste, might not like it. I just literally went back to the sheet and copied again and pasted, and it worked fine. All right, so there's my binned frequency table. And then the final thing I'm going to do to my bin frequency table is add a percent column. It unfortunately does not provide a percent column automatically, so we have to manually go in and do this. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you can see what I'm doing better. All right, so for each row, I want to put a percent, which just means what percent of scores fall in each bin, okay? And percent, of course, is calculated by the number divided by the total, n, and then multiplied by 100. So the first thing we need is the total number, right? How many people answered this question. And so for that, we're just going to count up all the frequencies, right? So I'm going to do equals sum and add up all my frequencies there. So that tells me that 194 people have an average self-esteem score. So that's my n that I'm going to divide by. So for each row then, for each value, each bin, I'm going to write is equal to the frequency divided by, where my total n is 194, and then I'm going to close that bracket and multiply by 100 to get my percent. And so for 0, it's going to be 0, but let's drag, so we're going to grab on the little green square in the bottom right, drag it all the way down, and then that just gives me my percentages for each bin.